Here we go. Oh. Yeah, Joe Gilloway. Yes, Joe. I am going on the air. Just running a few minutes late as usual. This is Bill Bostic with the Gazette Morning Update for March 15th. March 15th already, 2018. It's a Thursday. To slate it, it's 7:51 a.m. And this fine, hyper-local internet newscast is brought to you by Consolidated Insurance Services over in Paxtonia. My daughter has insurance with them, and I have to give them a call today because I got a question for them. Everything's fine, but I got a question. David Jones heads up that agency, Consolidated Insurance Services. Thank you for your support. And we got a interesting show today, to say the least, or newscast, I should say. It's not really a show, it's a newscast because I do pretty much use the same format every day. And that makes it a newscast, not a show. This is not a show, folks. Just to get the terminology right, we're going to take a look at some things related to the so-called National Walkout Day that took place across our nation yesterday in response to the Florida shootings, school shootings. And that's why I entitled this show, Class is in Session, because I'm going to run a little bit of a class here. If you want to take part in it, take a listen. But first, as always, let's take a quick look at the weather. Still, the chill has not left our area, folks. It's here at the studios in Studio, I should say, a Ubana Gardens section of Linglestown, wherever that is. It's actually St. Thomas Manor, adjoining the old part of Linglestown. It's 29 degrees, 28 degrees at Blue Meadows Station. And it's going to be a little bit warmer than yesterday today. 30% chance of showers in the afternoon, high of 45. Late winds, and then tonight, 0% of precipitation with a low of 27, partly cloudy. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, high of 38. The wind's kicking up 15 to 25 miles per hour. So not a bad stretch of weather here the next couple days. And that was brought to you by Anthony Cristillo, my friend, mentor, and supplier of clothing. He has the Fat Man Clothing Company based in Colonial Park. And one of the more jovial forms of clothing you can wear. I mean, I love to wear it. It's comfortable. And people always are asking me, why am I wearing the Fat Man clothing? Ask me when you see me, and I'll tell you. So that's your weather report for today. And let's just, I guess we'll let him out if I can find it. Here it is. I hear him in the background. The watchdog. This is going to be a long-winded, not really, a few minutes here, watchdog session on happenings yesterday at Central Dauphin High School. There we go. He just went right away, man. He just went right away. No, I don't have to do anything. He's out of here. Before we start this, let me get a drink of coffee, and then we'll dive right into it. Very good. All right. A couple things here. I'd like to say, first of all, good morning to Rebecca McCarthy and Joe Gilloway and Tim McCarthy. Thanks for checking in, folks. Look, the goal here is not to incite riots, to cause people heartache, to do any of that kind of thing. My goal here is to try and hold a classroom session where we think through a few things that maybe you don't think through. So much of what happens today, in my estimation, is we respond. We respond to everything. And social media certainly enables us to do that. We see something, we read something, we respond without thinking very much. So I'm going to try and encourage you to think through a few things. And I'm not saying that I'm perfectly right. However, I will say this, is that one of the interesting things about growing older, and I am a little bit older than many viewers, certainly many of the parents, and certainly students at Central Dauphin High School and Central Dauphin School District. I'm almost 60 years old. I grew up in a family where my father was a teacher, athletic director, politician, local politician. I've seen a lot of different things. I've attended hundreds and hundreds of local government meetings and all this kind of thing. So I have a lot of experience. So with experience, you at times, not always, not guaranteed, but occasionally you have just a little bit of wisdom that creeps in to your noggin. And I'm going to try and share some of that wisdom, fatherly wisdom, as we look at some things here. The other thing I'll note, and I got this from talking to an advisor to the Linglestown Gazette just last night, and you know who you are. What was shared with me is there's a different mindset now that we're post 9/11. 9/11, what happened in Manhattan, shook our country to the very core. In terms of, it showed us that we're vulnerable, that we don't live in this little cocoon here in the United States, that we are vulnerable to various forms of terrorism and things that happen. And anyone, since that time, and certainly if you were born post 9/11, you're living in a different world than that I grew up in the 60s and 70s in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania. I mean, the world is crazy compared to that time frame. Just over the course of my life, the pace of life, the information sharing that we have is just going bonkers. I mean, I noticed a few years ago that, there's no way I could keep up with everything. So you're hearing from someone that's pre 9/11. That I lived in that world. So we may be at different spots, and maybe this is where we're going to have some differences. But what I'm going to share very quickly here over the next few minutes is really the theme is, what are we teaching our kids? What are we teaching our kids? That's the theme. That's what the filtering through that I want to try and do. I'm not trying to blame anyone. I'm not trying to point the finger at anyone. I'm not trying to say that what happened yesterday was good or bad. I just want us to think about it, okay? And I think there's 3 different levels I'll try and get through here very, very quickly. What are we teaching our kids? When it came to yesterday, this is a national walkout, and I was doing my job for my employer. The Philadelphia Inquirer, for example, said, students poured out of classrooms Wednesday, armed with signs and bullhorns and a righteous anger. Thousands of Philadelphia area students joining with millions of their peers around the country, protesting gun violence and vowing to keep up the pressure until change comes. That's really what, on a national basis, it was about. It was about taking a look at our gun regulations. Do they make sense? Taking a look at how schools are providing security and how all this stuff works together. That was the issue at hand. And it was great to see. Last night, I think in the national news, they said that an estimated 3,500 schools participated. And in my mind, when you participate in this type of thing, the students left the building, held a civil, peaceful type protest to let people know that enough is enough. That was their message. That didn't happen at Central Dauphin High School yesterday. I was out there along with another correspondent taking a look at what was going on, and not a student left the building. So in terms of what was happening nationally, it didn't happen at Central Dauphin School District. What happened inside the building, I can't tell you. There was a letter saying that students were going to come out of their classroom for 10 minutes, link arms, have a moment of silence, that type of thing for the people who passed away. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just making a note that they didn't participate in the bigger picture yesterday. They did something other than that. That's not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just a statement. That's what happened at Central Dauphin. And If I think the only thing I would have done differently is that, and I did this a little bit yesterday or the day before, I think, is if I'm going to be an armchair school administrator, I might have done it a little bit differently. Again, sort of leaking into this is a little bit of my wisdom, I think, or just I'm coming from a different spot. Let's put it that way. Forget wisdom. I'm coming from a different spot. If a student leader came to me and said, "Look, Mr. Bostic, we want to participate somehow, some way with this walkout," I would say, "Great. That's perfectly fine." And if the student leader said, we may want to go outside and do whatever, I would say, "Hey, look, that is your prerogative. We live in America. We live in the United States. We have freedom to do certain things. When you come to public school, we can't keep you in these buildings. It's you come here on your free will and that kind of thing. So I'm not going to coach you one way or the other on what to do or not to do. Okay? You decide, you and your cohorts decide what you want to do. Now, you know the rules. If you leave the building, there are consequences to pay. But I'm not going to sit here and try and sanitize and coach you. You do what you need to do in this situation." So I would have given them freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. That's just my opinion. Again, I may be wrong. I may be dead wrong. I'm just saying that's where I'm coming from. And certainly as an administrator, I would have alerted the authorities that the students were thinking about leaving the building. I would have had them on standby if they did, that they could come in and just make sure that everything is cool, right? And after the 17 minutes were up, I would try and get staff, staff, public, enforcement people to get the students back in and take them into the auditorium. And basically read them the riot act for breaking school regulations. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to go outside randomly during a school day. And there was a school district in the Allentown area that's considering issuing something like 200 or 250 citations to students, punishing them. The response across the country is very much different. And what I'm just giving you my little take here. But on the other hand, after I read them the riot act and threatened to do whatever the punishment is for leaving the school, unauthorized leaving the school, I would have talked to them a little bit about that. I'm proud of them for taking a stand on a key issue in our country. So, and asked them and make sure they understood that leaving the school building is not going to be tolerated beyond the day. I would make a snap decision not to do anything, but to say, look, this is not the norm. It better not happen again. Under the circumstances, I'm going to work with you. So that's just another way of handling it. And I think that way is teaching kids to think on their own. That way is allowing them to work things out on their own instead of bringing them into an office and sanitizing what they do and working. Different ways. At Central Dauphin, they did it one way. I would have done it differently. Maybe you would have done it differently. I'm just putting it out there. I want you to think through this, okay? The last thing I want to talk about is Central Dauphin. This was stunning to me. I went out there a little bit after 10 o'clock to see what was going on. I wanted to see if any kids would go outside. And again, I reported on Facebook that they did not. There was no students outside the school like there were at thousands of places around the country, which is fine. That's a choice that was made locally here. So again, what are we teaching students with this? What happened was, and I tried to show it as best I could on Facebook. There were at our count with Linglestown Gazette, myself and another correspondent, 8 police cruisers surrounding and circling the building at 10 o'clock when the national walkout was supposed to be happening. 8 police cruisers. Now, understand, I guess the question is, what was the perceived threat? What was the perceived threat whenever, nothing really happened? They could have been on standby, but nothing happened. The place was encircled. I felt uncomfortable turning into, I questioned whether I wanted to turn into the school with all the police, because I knew if I drive up the hill, which I did, eyes are going to be on me, right? I'm allowed to be on that property. It's public property. I pay tax dollars there. As long as I'm in my car, I'm driving around, I'm not trying to enter the building, I'm okay. But all those eyes made me very, very nervous. I mean, and the thing I think we need to realize is that Central Dauphin High School and any school building is not a prison. If kids want to leave the building, they can. There's consequences to doing that. But if they want to leave the building, they can. So, I mean, what are we teaching kids? Turn it off. Almost done here. What are we teaching kids by having that big police presence at the school yesterday? I think, in my opinion, to close this down, I think what some of the things that we do as a society, we do in this community when it comes to the schools, is we're teaching fear and confusion. Fear and confusion. I mean, I would be confused, whenever, what is going on? Why are all these police around here? We're not going outside. We don't even have an interest in going outside. There's no student leaders talking about going outside. They already cut a deal with the principal to do it inside. And we have all these police around here. I don't know. It boggles my mind, folks. So I want you to think about that. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Choices were made, and we as a community, all we need to do is think about, what does this teach our kids? That's open for discussion. Put it in the comments. We'll go back and forth, that kind of thing. That's what journalists do. That's what commentators do. We're not here to point fingers and say, you're wrong and that's bad and that's good. No, we make choices as a group. Let's talk about it. Maybe there's a better way moving forward in this time that we live in, when stuff happens that's terrible. Unfortunately, I think we're bowing down to the bad guys. The terrorists, the bad guys, the crazy guys are winning. So with that, thank you so much for putting up with me for a few minutes while I got that stuff off my chest. If I've offended anybody, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it goes when you have a little bit, a very tiny platform, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 people have access to this thing, but hopefully it'll cause some discussion. That's all we're looking to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you so much for joining me, Bill Bostic, with the Gazette Morning Update, brought to you by Consolidated Insurance Services. 6109 Jonestown Road. We'll see you tomorrow. I'll be here. Hopefully. Bye.